Ethan had spent most of his life on the dry red plains of Exo-3, a planet on the edge of human colonization. His ranch stretched over miles of cracked soil, dotted with rusted fences and hardy crops that refused to die under the harsh sun. He had grown used to the solitude, talking to the wind and the animals more than to any human. Yet deep inside there was a hollow spot he couldn't fill, a quiet longing for companionship. That's why he had done something he never thought he would. He ordered a mail-order wife. He had imagined a quiet human woman who would cook, talk, laugh, and bring warmth to his lonely home. He pictured soft hands and gentle smiles, someone who would sit with him by the fire after long days of labor. He never imagined the person who would actually arrive. The day started like any other, with Ethan checking the water tanks and inspecting the fences for damage from last night's wind. The horizon shimmered with heat, and the dust seemed to rise in lazy waves. Then the sound of a distant engine cut through the stillness, a sound far too heavy and metallic to belong to any human transport. He frowned and squinted toward the horizon, watching as a small spacecraft hurtled out of the sky, smoke trailing from its engines. It crashed not far from the barn, throwing dirt and debris into the air. Ethan grabbed his rifle and ran, heart pounding in a mix of fear and curiosity. As he reached the smoking craft, the door hissed open, and out stepped a figure that made him stumble back in shock. The alien was tall, muscular, and moved with the grace of someone who had survived countless battles. Her skin was a deep coppery hue that glimmered under the sun, and her eyes were sharp, golden, and calculating. At her hips hung twin blasters, and her expression was a mix of amusement and challenge. She brushed off dust and debris like it meant nothing, and then looked directly at him with an almost mischievous grin. "I'm Zira," she said, her voice smooth but dangerous. "Looks like I'm your new companion." Ethan stared, speechless. I ordered a mail-order wife," he said finally, trying to keep his voice steady. Not an outlaw gunslinger?" Zira chuckled, a sound like metal sliding over stone. "Some mix-up in the interstellar mail, I suppose. But hey, I can be useful." She kicked at the dirt and glanced around. "This place looks interesting. I like a challenge." Ethan wanted to protest, to shout, to demand she leave immediately. But before he could speak, Zira's eyes had already scanned the ranch. She nodded to herself, then bent down and began inspecting the water tanks, pushing them, tapping them, and muttering under her breath. Within minutes, she had fixed a leak that Ethan had been struggling with for months. "What? How did you—" Ethan started, but Zira waved him off. "Don't worry about it," she said. "I've dealt with worse. Besides, you're lucky I like a good challenge." He wanted to be angry, but he couldn't. Her skill was undeniable. She moved with purpose, fixing broken fences, repairing water pumps, and even corralling stubborn livestock with techniques he had never seen before. Ethan gritted his teeth. This wasn't the gentle human companion he had imagined. It was something entirely different. Something wild, dangerous, and effective. By sunset, Zira had transformed the ranch. The fences were sturdier, the water tanks secure, and even the livestock seemed calmer under her watchful eye. Ethan leaned against the barn wall, wiping sweat from his forehead. He had to admit it. She had done more in one day than he had done in a month. "You're welcome," Zira said with a wink. "I like to get things done." Ethan shook his head, part in disbelief, part in awe. "I don't know if I like you," he muttered, though the truth was more complicated. Zira smirked. "Like or not, I'm here. And if you want to survive out here, you might just need me." That night, the wind howled across the plains, rattling the old windows and carrying dust into every corner of the small ranch house. Ethan sat by the fire, staring at Zira as she leaned back in a chair, cleaning her blasters with meticulous care. "You don't talk much," he said finally. "Depends on who's asking," she replied. "Not looking up?" "I asked," he said, trying to sound braver than he felt. Zira's golden eyes met his. "Then I'll tell you this, I've lived where humans haven't dared. I've fought more battles than you've had meals. And I've survived everyone. That's all you need to know for now." Ethan swallowed hard, realizing that this alien outlaw was not someone he could control. She was not someone he could command. And yet he felt a strange pull of curiosity. How had she ended up here? Why had the stars sent her to his lonely ranch? Days passed and Zira's presence became impossible to ignore. She woke at dawn, patrolled the ranch, hunted wild game, repaired machinery, and sometimes disappeared into the desert for hours. When she returned, she would bring back food or rare materials she had scavenged from nearby ruins. Ethan began to notice small changes. His fences no longer sagged. His livestock thrived, and even the crop seemed more alive than before. One morning, a small group of desert bandits appeared at the edge of the property, looking to steal livestock. Ethan reached for his rifle, but Zira was already moving. In a blur, she disarmed one bandit with the butt of her blaster, pushed another to the ground, and in less than a minute the bandits were fleeing across the desert, tails between their legs. Ethan stared, heart racing. "You didn't tell me you were that good," he admitted, feeling both impressed and unnerved. "I told you I'm useful," Zira said, smirking. "Useful enough to survive out here. You'll see." Ethan had to admit that survival was something he valued above all else. And here was Zira, stronger, smarter, and faster than he had ever been. She wasn't what he had ordered, but maybe, just maybe, she was what he needed. One evening, a distant rumble shook the horizon. Ethan squinted toward the sky and saw dark clouds rolling in, twisting in unnatural shapes. A sandstorm was coming faster than he had ever seen on XO3. He began to panic, running around the ranch to secure what he could. But Zira moved with calm precision. "Follow my lead," she said. "We don't have time for hesitation." Together they reinforced the fences, tied down equipment, and secured the livestock. Zira climbed onto the barn roof, signaling Ethan to do the same. The first gusts of the storm tore across the plains, carrying dust and debris that stung their skin and made it hard to breathe. But Zira remained steady, shouting instructions that Ethan struggled to follow. Hours passed like minutes, and when the storm finally began to ease, the ranch was battered but intact. Ethan leaned against a post, exhausted, covered in dust and sweat. Zira came down from the roof, brushing dust from her shoulders as if she had barely noticed the chaos. "You did good," Ethan said, finally allowing himself to smile. "We survived," Zira grinned. "We survived. That's what matters." For the first time, Ethan realized that this alien outlaw was not an intruder, not a mistake, not even a replacement. She was a partner, one who demanded respect, challenged him, and pushed him to be better. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for certain. Life on this ranch had just become far more interesting, far more dangerous, and far more alive than he could have ever imagined. As the sun set over the red plains, Ethan and Zira sat silently watching the horizon. Dust swirled around them, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The ranch was safe for now, but the universe had a way of sending surprises, and Ethan had learned to expect the unexpected. And with Zira by his side, perhaps he could survive whatever came next. For the first time in years, he felt a spark of excitement, a feeling he hadn't known since his youth. He didn't know if he liked it or feared it, but he knew one thing. The days ahead would never be boring again. And somewhere deep in the desert beyond the ranch, a shadow moved, a shadow that would bring new challenges, new enemies, and new adventures. Ethan didn't yet understand the full danger of Zira's past, or how her arrival would change everything he thought he knew about life, survival, and trust. But he was ready, or at least he hoped he was. The night fell, silent and heavy, and for the first time Ethan didn't feel entirely alone. Zira sat beside him, her gaze on the stars, and for all her wildness and danger he felt strangely safe. The morning after the storm, the ranch looked battered but alive. Dust clung to every surface and the crops swayed weakly in the hot wind. Ethan surveyed the damage with a grim face. Fences were splintered, water tanks had shifted, and some livestock had vanished in the chaos. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Survival had never been easy on XO3, but this storm had pushed him to the edge. Zira was already moving, inspecting the land, checking for weak spots, and giving quick commands to Ethan. Her energy seemed endless, as if the storm had only fueled her. She moved with purpose, scanning the horizon for any threats and adjusting the ranch's defenses. Ethan watched her, a strange mix of admiration and disbelief stirring in him. "You know," he said finally, "I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask for a gunslinger alien outlaw to land on my property." Zira glanced over her shoulder, golden eyes glinting. "You didn't ask for much, did you? And yet here I am. You'll learn to like it." Ethan chuckled, though it sounded hollow even to him. "I doubt that." "Doubt all you want," Zira said, tightening a fence brace. "But if you want this ranch to survive, you'll need me." Days turned into weeks. Zyra proved herself invaluable, handling tasks Ethan had never imagined she could. She hunted game, repaired equipment, and even taught him new ways to manage the livestock. Her presence was intense, her personality impossible to ignore. Ethan found himself both frustrated and intrigued by her. She was unlike anyone he had ever met, and every day brought a new surprise. One evening, while Ethan was repairing a fence post, Zyra approached with a distant look in her eyes. "We have company," she said softly. Ethan froze. "What do you mean?" "Not friendly," Zyra replied, scanning the horizon. "A bounty hunter. Someone wants me back, dead or alive." Ethan's heart sank. He had already learned that Zyra's past was complicated, but he hadn't realized how dangerous it was. "Do they know where we are?" he asked, tightening his grip on the post he held. "Possibly. They're smart enough to track me. And they're coming." Zyra's fingers brushed her blasters, ready for action. They had little time. Ethan and Zyra worked together, reinforcing the ranch, setting traps, and positioning themselves for defense. The tension was palpable. Ethan could feel his pulse racing, a mixture of fear and adrenaline he hadn't felt in years. When the bounty hunter arrived, he didn't waste time with words. His hoverbike kicked up dust as he landed, a blaster aimed squarely at the ranch. Ethan froze for a moment, but Zyra moved first. She leapt into action, drawing her twin blasters and firing with precise accuracy. Shots rang out across the plain, hitting the ground and ricocheting off metal. The bounty hunter's weapons clashed with hers, sparks flying with every strike. Ethan watched, awestruck, as Zyra moved like a force of nature. Her movements were fast, calculated, and deadly, yet there was an elegance to them that made her almost hypnotic. He realized he couldn't just stand there. He had to act, not as a helpless rancher, but as a partner, someone willing to fight alongside her. Gripping his rifle, Ethan took careful aim. He remembered all the practice and training he had gone through over the years, and for the first time he truly felt capable. He fired a precise shot, hitting the bounty hunter's hoverbike engine. Sparks flew and the bike skidded across the sand, throwing the hunter off balance. Zyra seized the moment, disarming the hunter and pinning him to the ground with a swift motion. The standoff ended quickly, the bounty hunter defeated but alive. Ethan's chest heaved as he lowered his rifle, staring at Zyra with newfound respect. She grinned, wiping sweat from her brow. "You didn't do badly," she said. "Not bad at all. I didn't think I could," Ethan admitted, feeling a rush of pride. "But you make me want to try." Zyra's eyes softened just for a moment. "Good, that's all I've ever asked. Survival isn't about doing everything alone. It's about trust and timing." The bounty hunter was tied up and left under guard while Ethan and Zyra assessed the ranch. The encounter had shaken them, but it also revealed something important. They were stronger together. They could face challenges, survive storms, fend off enemies, and still come out intact. The ranch was no longer just Ethan's domain. It was a shared space, a place where both human and alien could thrive. Over the following days, the bond between Ethan and Zyra grew in subtle ways. They shared meals, repaired equipment side by side, and even laughed at each other's mistakes. Zyra told stories of her past, narrow escapes, battles won, and planets she had traversed. Ethan shared tales of his life on XO3, the hardships of farming and the loneliness of isolation. With every story, they learned more about each other, bridging the gap between two worlds. One morning, Zyra disappeared into the desert without warning. Ethan grew anxious, pacing the ranch as hours passed. When she returned, she carried a strange, glowing plant and a small container of water she had found in a distant oasis. "Thought this might help your crops," she said. Ethan took the gifts, speechless at her thoughtfulness. She shrugged. Even outlaws can be considerate. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, they sat outside the ranch house, watching the sky turn shades of orange and gold. The desert was quiet, except for the occasional rustle of wind through the cracked earth. Ethan realized that he no longer felt the same emptiness he had felt before Zyra's arrival. Her presence was unpredictable, challenging and sometimes frustrating. "But it was also invigorating, you know," he said quietly. "I never expected any of this." Zyra glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "Neither did I. But maybe some surprises are worth it." Their moment was interrupted by a distant rumble. Ethan squinted at the horizon, spotting a small ship approaching at high speed. Zyra's eyes narrowed. "Looks like trouble. Again." The ship landed on the outskirts of the ranch, kicking up clouds of dust. A group of alien mercenaries disembarked, weapons drawn, clearly intent on taking Zira back. Ethan's heart raced. He realized that this wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about defending their home, their partnership, and everything they had worked to build. Zira moved with calm efficiency, setting up defensive positions and giving instructions. Ethan followed her lead, his earlier fear replaced by determination. The mercenaries advanced, but Ethan and Zira were ready. They used the terrain to their advantage, setting traps, taking cover, and firing with precision. Every shot Ethan took was calculated, every move intentional. He had become more than a rancher. He was a fighter, a partner, someone capable of standing alongside Zira in the face of danger. The battle was intense, but short. Zira's skill combined with Ethan's ingenuity allowed them to outmaneuver the mercenaries. By the end, the attackers were defeated, fleeing back to their ship with tails between their legs. Ethan breathed heavily, his hands shaking, but there was a thrill in his chest he hadn't felt in years. "You did well," Zira said, clapping him on the shoulder. "You're learning fast." Ethan smiled, a genuine wide smile. "I had a good teacher." As night fell, the ranch was quiet once more. The stars glittered above, and the desert seemed calm, almost peaceful. Ethan looked at Zira, realizing that his life had changed forever. He hadn't received the companion he had imagined, but he had gained something far more valuable, a partner who challenged him, protected him, and made him feel alive. Zira, sitting beside him, didn't need words. Her presence was enough. Together they had faced storms, bandits, bounty hunters, and the harshness of the desert. They had survived, and in doing so, they had forged a bond that went beyond expectation, beyond prediction, and beyond what either of them had imagined. Ethan realized that life was unpredictable, and sometimes the best things came when you least expected them. He had ordered a mail-order wife, thinking he wanted comfort and routine. Instead, he had received an alien gunslinger, a survivor, a partner. And for the first time in his life, he didn't want things to go back to the way they were. He didn't know what the future held. There would be more dangers, more surprises, and more challenges. But for now, Ethan and Zira sat together looking at the stars, knowing they could face anything. Together. The ranch, once a lonely expanse of red plains, had become a home. Not the home Ethan had imagined, but one that was real, alive, and full of potential. The wind whispered across the desert, carrying dust and distant sounds of wildlife. Ethan and Zira sat in silence, comfortable in each other's presence. The past was behind them, the future uncertain, and the present moment alive with possibility. Life on XO3 had changed forever. And for the first time, Ethan welcomed the chaos, the danger, and the unexpected adventures that Zira had brought with her. Because sometimes survival was not about doing everything alone. Sometimes it was about finding someone who challenged you, protected you, and made you better. And Ethan had found that person in the most unlikely of ways, under the blazing sun of an alien world. The desert night stretched on, stars glittering like diamonds in the sky, and for the first time in years, Ethan felt truly alive.